So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and today we have another custom scenario. This one was made by Froggy, which is good to see, and this is another one of those scenarios as well, which uses a settlement, at least, that already exists. So, for example, the two Eclipse scenarios that we've seen more recently used city settlements. This one, some of you may recognise this map layout because it is used in the Third Age campaigns. I believe it's a Northman tile set, this one. I think the middlemen get something different, and this does look quite similar to the layouts that Rhudaur themselves actually have over in DAC, or at least that part of the map seems to have this layout quite a lot. Also, I believe the Angmar variant of this over in DAC has got like a sort of dark temple up here rather than a longhouse, which is pretty neat. And it also has a similar sort of vibe to that hill fort map that we've seen several times as well, in that it's a little bit open, but they still have the palisade defences, and also Froggy has made some efforts to make the settlement itself a little bit more fortified as well by adding a large moat around the outside of it, because it does exist in this little canal area, which is pretty cool, which is another sign, of course, that the map itself has been made as a scenario, because you'd never see this geographically on the map, I don't think, in Middle-earth. And there's also some little outer fortifications over here as well, which can be utilised. It means as well that you can't surround the whole settlement and get to the back gates unless you go through over here, which is pretty interesting. As we've already seen, Rhudaur are all of the armies that are on the defence, and it's Khazad-Dum who are on the attack. And you can see two of the Rhudaur armies are back, and they will need to march forward and get into position. That shouldn't be too much of a problem, because I can't imagine they'll take longer than the dwarves to get here, especially with a bit of cavalry running interference. But more on Rhudaur in a moment. We'll go through the dwarves first and foremost. So Khazad-Dum, based on geographical location, I assume the dwarves in the Misty Mountains. Coming down, and I suppose MORVA TARTH is probably the best settlement I could use, so I'll be referring to this settlement as such from now on. So starting off with Buzzard, of course Khazad-Dum, all of the armies on the attack, some upgraded 4th Legion Shield Guard. Khazad-Dum are going to want to make this all about brute strength in melee, because their infantry is certainly of higher quality than Rhudaur's. Rhudaur are going to have to take efficient trades with their armour piercing and use their throwing projectiles and other ranged units to really try and win this battle, I would think, because the dwarven quality is going to be too great for them in melee. Mithril Guard, for example, have got that armour piercing attack on them as well. Oh no, they're not armour piercing anymore, are they? That's the Guards of Khazad-Dum, so this is the 3 hit point infantry, which is actually better against Rhudaur, because the armour piercing attacks not terribly useful against the Northmen, to be honest with you. It is in some of their higher tier units, but at mowing through most of their rank and file, the Mithril Guard will be able to stand and fight for an incredibly long time. More 4th Legion there. All Guns of Khazad-Dum will be pretty good in this matchup, because as far as archers go, they're better than any archer that Rhudaur have, other than the Rhudaur Rangers, but that's because of the body piercing, of course. They can still be skirmished quite efficiently by Rhudaur, to be honest with you, but the amount of damage that these Orc Hunters can do against the more lightly armoured troops from Rhudaur should be pretty good. Picking the target's going to be key there. Khazad-Dum Reclaimers as well. Khazad-Dum certainly not defenceless when it comes to throwing projectiles. They don't have the variety that Rhudaur have, but as far as a single unit goes, this is a very, very good one. Not only for the damage they can do with their throwing axes, but also they can certainly hold their own in melee as well. A couple of units of them. Another unit of Orc Hunters there. We've got some Warriors of Khazad-Dum, so just the rank and file of the Dwarves of Khazad-Dum, but of course they can far outperform the rank and file that Rhudaur are going to be providing. Rhudaur swordsmen, of course, are numerous, but they don't have the same level of quality as a unit of Dwarves like this does. Over here in the middle, more 4th Legion, some upgraded 3rd Legion as well, which are of course the higher tier infantry unit, really, really good. Going to be tough for Rhudaur to beat unless they can get their armour piercing into a good engagement against them. We've got more Warriors of Khazad-Dum on the flank, a ram being pushed up by some more 3rd Legion. Of course it is a settlement with gates, so they are going to be very necessary to get forward. Warriors of Khazad-Dum, they do have some mercenary cavalry as well, so paying some of the men on their horses. Dwarves are not the biggest fan of them, of course, and they are going to be riding alongside them. They are melee cavalry, but to be honest with you, Rhudaur are going to have the edge on horseback here, because this is really a very basic unit of melee cavalry, more to try and defend against any sort of cavalry shenanigans that Rhudaur may be spewing forth, I would imagine. And then a couple of units here of 2nd Legion Axe Guard as well, so a bit of armour piercing, but the base attack is going to be impressive there as well. And also the armour upgrade makes them pretty tanky. Then moving on to Froggy's army, going to be viewing this from his perspective. He was actually, he sent me the battle from both Rhudaur and Khazad-Dum's perspective, but I'm going to do it from Khazad-Dum's because it's from his perspective and he did make the scenario, so it feels more correct to do it that way. 4th Legion Shield Guard on the front line, again, obviously very tanky spears. Again, some 2nd Legion Axe Guard, some more 2nd Legion there. 2nd Legion, some Orc Hunters, 3rd Legion, so all of the Legion units except the 1st we've seen so far. Warriors of Khazad-Dum, more warriors pushing up a ram, Orc Hunters, some more Khazad-Dum Reclaimers, some Miners, so just some entry-level units here. Not really the best unit, of course, especially against Rhudaur, where the armor piercing they have as a militia unit isn't terribly useful, but you know, they're just here to push up the ram and make up the numbers. And to make up for that, of course, Froggy does have a couple of bodyguard units, including the armor piercing guards of Khazad-Dum and the sort of the entry-level bodyguard unit, if there is such a thing, in the Legion bodyguard, which is where his general is going to be. And I think that's pretty much it. So moving to the northern wing of the Khazad-Dum armies, we have Bogdan 19k playing, of course, as the dwarves. 4th Legion, Warriors of Khazad-Dum, more Orc Hunters, several units of warriors here. 4th Legion Shield Guard, more Orc Hunters. He's also got a unit of Merc Cavalry to guard against any marauding Rhudaur horsemen. Got some 3rd Legion Infantry, some more Orc Hunters, some Miners pushing up the ram. We do have the 1st Legion. 1st Legion Pikes, of course, armor-piercing pikemen, devastating in melee. Of course, the armor-piercing is not terribly useful against Rhudaur, but the point still stands that as far as pikes go, they are consistently the most damaging in the game. And of course, as dwarves, they're also not half bad at keeping themselves alive either. Guards of Khazad-Dum and Legion Bodyguard are once more, and also a unit of Sons of the Fallen, which is nice to see. High TSBA unit, they're not multiple HP, but they're pretty much as good as a unit, or as tanky as a unit can get before becoming multiple HP. And then the final Khazad-Dum army here we have is going to be Doctor 2. He has got some Warriors of Khazad-Dum, he's got some 4th Legion Shield Guard, some more Orc Hunters. I'd imagine it's very similar here. 4th Legion Shield Guard down here, a couple of units of Sentries of Khazad-Dum, so some basic pikes as well, which is good. Orc Hunters, Warriors, 3rd Legion, more Sentries, a ram, a couple of rams. He's actually got some Hammers of Gundabad as well, which are locked morale shock infantry. So depending on what you need, really, they are superior to the 2nd Legion Axe Guard. Of course, over in DAC, they are singularly the best unit of armor-piercing shock in the game. Not the case here in Reforged. They're sort of more very high tier, but not quite into the uber tier. Locked morale really does help them as well. Another unit of 1st Legion Pikes, another unit of Warriors, and the Legion Bodyguard here at the back, as well as some Iron Watch and Mirror. Now that could be really, really useful for cracking through some defences. Rhudaur will have to keep their eyes on that unit in particular, very devastating. So, within the settlement we can see that Modexa is here, he's got a catapult, very good position to put the catapult, of course, showering down blows onto the dwarves as they approach. Going to be important to use a unit like that well, because of course Rhudaur, if it comes down to just a slog in melee, they will lose. Important to use stuff like the Troll Short Axe Throwers wisely as well, using them against the right kind of units. Heavily armoured and shielded units will withstand the damage that they can dish out better. Much better, I think, to wait until some of the pikemen move forward, but we'll see what Lango decides to do with them. Modexa's got some Rhudaur swordsmen back here. Witch Realm Enslavers are going to be one of the more outstanding units against Khazad-Dum, because of course they're a bodyguard tier armour-piercing unit. They will still lose against stuff like Khazad-Dum in a 1-to-1, I believe, but or the Guards of Khazad-Dum 1-to-1, but even so, against the vast majority, they will be superior. Rhudaur clansmen with the armour upgrade, decent for holding the line, but the amount of damage they do is going to be fairly limited against the better Khazad-Dum units, but still good for holding on to the front gate. Granadine Pikes will be very good. They will of course lose to the 1st Legion, but they're going to be a very important tool, I think, for Rhudaur to try and hold on to their front lines. Granadine Berserkers and Reforged Javelins, again, two very important units for equalising that melee fight. And some Etenmore's Troll Hunters, more clansmen, plenty of spears and axes as you would expect from Rhudaur. Etenmore's Troll Hunters again. Rhudaur Axemen, who are very basic shock infantry units, but of course that armour piercing is going to be very necessary to take even trades, or take good trades, because they will die in droves of course, but the damage they can kick out before they do is going to be very important and very telling for Rhudaur. More Rhudaur swordsmen back here, so scattered all throughout MORVA TARTH, and more Rhudaur swordsmen, so plenty of the rank and file. We've got some cavalry outside the walls as well. We've got a couple of units of the Coldfell Maidens, going to be superior to the mercenary cavalry certainly. Really, I think this unit is just going to be about stopping the dwarves from advancing as comfortably as they otherwise would. We shall wait and see. And then the outer defence, we have got Rhudaur clansmen, Granadine pikemen in there as well. We've got some Etenmore's Troll Hunters in the back, Rhudaur clansmen, more Granadine Berserkers, decent little force out here, including the Enslavers, and more clansmen and swordsmen as well. Yeah, that'll be decent enough to hold on to this little gap over here. Less ranged units than I was expecting out here, to be honest with you, in this gap, but perhaps that void can be filled by the reinforcing armies back over here, starting with Joran. He has got a lot of Rhudaur clansmen. My goodness, that is a ton of decent spears that can be used for the front line with that armour upgrade. Over here as well, a lot of Rhudaur swordsmen, so as a reinforcement army, this is definitely going to be all about the numbers of infantry that it can add to that front line. Essenmoor's Troll Hunters and Dunman Pikemen, Franodine Pikemen as well, and then Franodine Berserkers and Witch Realm Enslavers. And then over here we have Demon's Hunter, who has got some Blackwolds, some Rhudaur Axe and Blackwolds will be pretty good against Khazad-Dum actually. We've got some Franodine Pikes, Trollshaw Axe Throwers, Rhudaur Clansmen, more Trollshaws, Swordsmen in the back and to the side, Enslavers and Berserkers in the middle, and then some Axemen and Clansmen in the centre as well. So, really depends on what the cavalry is going to do here, but without further ado, let's begin. It will be quite interesting to see. I think I was tempted to make a little bit of a cut, and I think I will actually, so I'll rejoin if the cavalry starts skirmishing with one another, but outside of that, it will be when the dwarves start to attack the settlement itself. So I guess now, as the rain comes in, is the best time to rejoin the action. You can see that the cavalry is marauding forwards, going to try and buy a little bit of time for the reinforcing armies to get forward and help to man the settlement. And how well Khazad-Dum can navigate these Coldfell Maidens and how quickly may impact directly how ready Rhudaur are to actually receive them on the front lines. Another unit of Coldfell Maidens coming forward, as well as the Franodine Nobles from Demon's Hunters, so his cavalry of course was able to get onto the scene pretty quickly. In come the Merc Cavalry. They do actually prevent the Coldfell Maidens from getting their javelins off, their initial javelins, so this is a better engagement than it would have otherwise been, but I imagine they're going to rout very, very quickly, purely because of the amount of Coldfell Maidens that are around. Of course, they are Spear Cavalry in melee, very basic Spear Cavalry, but still that can certainly help when it comes to dealing with Merc Cavalry like that. The real danger, of course, is in the Franodine Nobles. The dwarves will want to deal with them very quickly. This is sort of thing you'd expect from the Aothiad, or the Aothiod, as it were, the Proto-Rohirrim. Rhudaur and Rohan took very different paths as Northmen, it would seem. Mercenary Cavalry starting to fall away, just the one unit of Merc Cavalry not going to be enough. Definitely going to need the support of the other units from Buzzard. You can see the Coldfell Maidens trying to get up and around. Merc Cavalry actually trading reasonably well. I'm surprised the Coldfell Maidens have not... I assume what they're going to try and do here, actually, looking at this, seeing as they're not using their javelins, they're probably going to try and deal... Well, that's a surprising place to put the general, to be honest with you, on horseback in the Merc Cavalry unit. Khazad-Dum's morale is such that it's probably not going to be too much of a problem, but still. His general does fall by the wayside, but like I was saying, I assume what they're going to try and do here is use the Coldfell Maiden's javelin ammunition on the infantry after the cavalry has been dealt with, which is not a bad idea. The only problem with that is Khazad-Dum have got the archers and the Orc Hunters to be able to zone them out. Even that does serve a purpose though, because it means that the Khazad-Dum will not have the same level of ammunition when it comes to actually trying to take the settlements as they otherwise would have. Mercenary Cavalry continuing to try and push forward. It is a bit of a mess out here. I mean, eventually Rhudaur will get the upper hand in this cavalry fight, but to be fair, I think Khazad-Dum have actually done reasonably well in the cav engagements so far. The Coldfell Maidens have not been quite as dominant as you otherwise expect. The Coldfell Maidens are going to try and avoid here the 4th Legion Shield Guard as they plod towards melee combat, but they do manage to avoid them in the end. And eventually the Merc Cavalry do break, of course. Mercenaries do have that morale debuff, especially in relation to the rest of the Khazad-Dum roster, which is very stout indeed. The Mercenaries certainly not made of the same stuff. More arrows coming in. Some of the Coldfell Maidens actually are getting caught here by this one unit of spears as it moves forward. Some of these riders will be brought low, you would imagine. Franodine Nobles moving forward, and they will get a nice charge here into the Dwarven Miners, but the Miners themselves are a highly sacrificial unit, but the Franodine Nobles will just be able to barge right on through. They could have actually carried that charge forward into the Khazad-Dum Reclaimers there, but returning Mercenary Cavalry coming forward as well. The Dwarven Miners actually, as they swing with those armour-piercing picks, will do more damage than most other fodder tier units. Fodder by Dwarven standards anyway, and there's arrows coming in. It looks as though Rhudaur are actually pulling back now, perhaps sensing that they've done what damage they can. Perhaps they're going to try and preserve the lives of javelins for later to use in choke points. And of course cavalry in the late game can be incredibly useful in a siege as well. So the cavalry does pull back. Granadine Nobles in particular could be really, really devastating in the late game as well. Excuse me. As the dwarves begin to move forwards. 4th Legion as well, very good unit for zoning enemies out. I mean, Khazad-Dum in general, most of their anti-cavalry tools are going to come in melee. They don't have the same ability to keep cavalry at arm's length like their Erebor brethren do with their crossbows, but what Khazad-Dum lack in their supporting units compared to Erebor, they do make up for in terms of sheer martial strength in melee, which as the battle wears on, as we get into the settlement itself, or trying to take the settlement itself, that's where Khazad-Dum's strengths should become apparent. Orc Hunters getting into place. Of course, the disadvantage of a settlement like this is it is somewhat open, so enemy skirmishers will be able to fire in and get the odd kill here and there. And Orc Hunters are a decent little archer. And what are they going to try and go after here? Trollshaw Axe Throwers. That is a good choice. Are they going to hit anything? They do a decent little nick there on the warriors of Khazad-Dum, but it could be far worse. Like the catapult could be getting hits in the choke point, which would be far, far worse for them. Archers definitely going after one of the correct targets, I think, the Trollshaw Axe Throwers, and even if they miss, they're going to hit units that are in behind. Reforged Javelins have got that second hit point, of course, so they're not going to be quite so easy to kill off as the lightly armoured Axe Throwers are. And of course, this is a very narrow choke point as well, so it's going to be a real grind. So if Rhudaur can get their supporting tools into position, I think Medex was probably told to stop firing the catapult so early and save it for later, because if you can save it for the choke point battles, that's going to be where things really get quite spicy. Quite necessary for Rhudaur to do as well. You can see a huge glut of Rhudaur infantry entering the settlement here from Joran, most of his force of course made up of swordsmen and clansmen. But the rank and file are going to be very important here, they're going to need a lot of them against the dwarves, of course. Rhudaur, probably one of those rare instances where Rhudaur probably have more men actually than the attackers, because it is a 4v4. But the quality discrepancy, of course, between the basic units of both sides is fairly high. But I do think if Rhudaur can get their supporting tools like the catapult, archers, axe throwers, that sort of thing into position, they should win this fight, really. The settlements, I think, is favourable enough for them to be considered the favourites. Bit of cavalry support potentially in the late game as well. While still, arrows finding their marks. Still going after those Trollshaw Axe Throwers, actually. Again, getting a bit of collateral on those Witch Realm Enslavers. Trying to go after the Reforged Javelins by the looks of things as well, but they are being covered somewhat by the armour upgraded and also heavily shielded Rhudaur clansmen. Reforged Javelin's going to try and leave the vicinity though. Dwarven Miners coming forward from Bogdan, and he is going to batter down those gates. So it looks like they're going to split off 2 and 2. Froggy and Buzzard going to be heading through the outer gap there. And then Bogdan and Doctor to Doctor, or Doctor 2, going to be trying to go through this front gate. So it is an interesting conundrum this. Do you put all of your eggs into the basket of going through the front gate here, which is very narrow, or do you try and split your forces and go through the outer little makeshift fortification over here, which is the long way round and also allows you to get hit in the sides quite a lot by any Rhudaur forces to find themselves over here. Although one thing I am noticing actually, Rhudaur don't really have any archers. No rangers either, not that I could see. They could have been hiding, of course, but all of their ranged forces would appear to be javelins and catapults, which, to be fair, are more dangerous to the dwarves, but they don't have the ability to slowly poke and prod at those Orc Hunters, which makes the Orc Hunters a much more dangerous unit than they otherwise would have been. A hailstorm here of fire arrows. A misty and rainy day here in the northern moors. This catapult is classic medieval 2 siege pathfinding. It's sort of spinning on the spot, considering what it wants to do as it gets absolutely pounded on by enemy archers. Siege equipment, of course, not exactly the most responsive unit in the game, to be sure. And now the Dwarven Ram is going to go about its business. Still that poor catapult. I'm sure Medex is trying to get it out of harm's way, but it's just not having any of it. This does of course mean as well that No archers can sideswipe Froggy's army as it moves forward. And Rhudaur are just going to have to sort of sit here and take the initial skirmishing from the Orc Hunters, but of course, as the battle wears on, the skirmish advantage will flick very heavily into Rhudaur's favour with the Axe Throwers, Attenmore's Troll Hunters, that sort of thing. As the Spearmen stand ready, the front gate falls. Indeed. Are they going to move in immediately would be my question. Or are they going to try and continue to poke and prod at Rhudaur for the time being and be satisfied with that? You can tell that Rhudaur are sort of preparing for the fact that they're going to be skirmished out here as well, getting their units into loose formation, not blobbing them up quite so much so those Orc Hunters can get some almost guaranteed hits really on something. Khazad-Dum continuing to wait for the time being. Catapult reforming, only 38 of them remaining. Orc Hunters, their bows sit silent for now. Another unit of Trollshaw Axe Throwers moving forward. A couple of volleys into them would not go amiss. Try and take away Rhudaur's primary means of winning. I mean, to be fair, with the fact that the Dwarves can use their Orc Hunters fairly freely, I would say that it's actually a very evenly poised fight, this. Not so much a Rhudaur advantage from the off, I would suggest. The miners coming in. They are. I mean, I don't think this is really going to achieve all that much. Like I said, I'm not really a fan of committing one unit of lower tier infantry to a fight like this without any sort of support, because they're not really going to achieve too much. I suppose the miners actually will get the odd kill onto Rhudaur clansmen, but if Rhudaur are really paying attention here, they could just sandwich these miners between these two units of spears, and I would imagine they would break fairly quickly. But the miners... yeah, there's some throwing axes being used actually, which I think is a little bit of a waste if I'm being honest. There's no need to use something as useful as throwing axes on a unit of miners, but I mean, to be fair, these throwing axes will absolutely carve through miners very quickly, so... either way, these dwarves will be shown the exit really very, very quickly. Something a little bit more substantial is going to be needed to make genuine gains into the settlement. But the dwarves will be happy that some ammunition is being utilised on a unit that is ultimately a very basic. Meanwhile, towards the outside of the settlement. Ooh. Thought that was a unit of enemy cavalry for a second then, but no. Merc cavalry, which did get a cheeky charge onto these Rhudaur swordsmen that were in loose formation. Of course, the downside of having this sort of formation is if you do get blitzkrieg from the front, you're not really going to be too prepared for it. Some streaking artillery fire there in the distance. Rhudaur swordsmen up on the high ground here as Froggy's army continues to move forward. Crowned nobles are going to come out. Yeah, and that's going to convince the cavalry to leave once more. Going to be a fight of two fronts at this point. Dwarven miners being backed up now by warriors of Khazad-Dum. Catapult did fire, but it's now reforming itself. Axe throwers continuing to be utilised. Warriors of Khazad-Dum will actually be better at taking that axe thrower fire because they are shielded, and the shields are obviously going to be pointing in the same direction when you're talking about an engagement like this. I mean, they do actually have an opportunity here to try and flood forwards here. It's a defence with gaps. They could come forward with a ton of infantry, and that might have a desired effect, but for the time being they're content to just bring forward a couple of units of warriors of Khazad-Dum to test the waters. And Rhudaur clansmen will lose to warriors of Khazad-Dum fairly handily, but it's going to be a numbers game here for Rhudaur. They're just going to be able to continuously send forward basic infantry like this to the front line, keep the dwarves in place, and then utilise their ranged firepower. There is of course the Orc Hunters of Khazad-Dum, several units of these archers that are going to be able to fire into the settlements as well. Very important for the dwarves, and they're going after the Attenmore's Troll Hunters. A little bit better at taking this arrow fire than the Trollshaw Axe Throwers were. By Rhudaur standards, they are armoured after all. Rhudaur clansmen trudging into position. It'll take a long time after all for the dwarves to get through all of these spears. A few arrows finding their marks as well. Rhudaur swordsmen in the background. Meanwhile, outside, perhaps unsurprisingly, you can see they're trying to skirmish with the enemy. Trollshaw Axe Throwers getting into position. Definitely going to be the target for the Orc Hunters that are tackling this outer fortification as well. And They are not going to withstand that kind of punishment too well, the axe throwers. But this defence, it is fairly substantial, this defence, but eventually the dwarves should push through here. But of course, that just means that Rhudaur can turn their attention towards defending another outer gate. So Rhudaur have got plenty of contingency here. Meanwhile, some Rhudaur swordsmen adding themselves to the mix as well. Another hit there from the catapult, but again hitting primarily warriors of Khazad-Dum. Another hit there and some orc hunters as well. So damage is being done by the catapult, but not quite the all-encompassing damage Rhudaur would have hoped for, I don't think. Sentries of Khazad-Dum moving forward to trying to get some pikes in there. I don't know if the shape of the engagement is quite right for pikes just yet. Maybe it is. Maybe the pikes can sort of really fortify their position. Again, Rhudaur swordsmen on the front line will do a little bit more damage to the dwarven units, but they'll be a little bit more fragile as well. Spearmen, of course, are pretty good defensively, even if they aren't the best at dealing damage. Dwarven miners are still alive, and their warriors of Khazad-Dum still doing their thing. The shape of the terrain here actually is providing a little bit of cover for the dwarves. The straight arc of these javelins is interrupted somewhat by their own men, so they don't quite have the luxury. I mean, it'd probably be this would probably be the best place to try and shoot downwards. Orc hunters that are out of ammunition are moving forward, so the dwarves perhaps sensing a bit of an opportunity to push forward with a little bit more strength. Nice, nice, nice. Meanwhile, over here, I imagine it's still skirmish settings out here. Dwarven miners are still here. Merc cavalry, which is shaken pretty much constantly because of the loss of Buzzard's general. Warriors of Khazad-Dum are in position. What is going on here? Is this a little sneaky pathway up here? It may very well be. Probably not intentional, this, but I mean, it's pretty cool actually, because it sort of lends credence to the fact that these were hastily constructed fortifications, and now the dwarves are finding gaps in the crude offerings that Rhudaur have on this occasion, so they are going to be able to get up here, and this will probably catch Rhudaur a little bit unawares, especially seeing as it is 2nd Legion. Rhudaur swordsmen are going to get a lot of damage dealt to them. Fortunately for them, they're not going to be subject to the charge bonus. But even so, when it comes to just being in pure melee, warriors of Khazad-Dum and 2nd Legion Axe Guard easily going to have the beating of some Rhudaur swordsmen. Do they have any? They've got Rhudaur berserkers. To be fair, they could throw some nasty projectiles into the side here. They're also starting to test the waters from the front, which of course the Trollshore axe throwers are trying to respond to. Dwarven miners and some battered and bruised warriors of Khazad-Dum. So it's all systems go at this point. Yeah, now of course Rhudaur are realising what's actually happening. They've got another choke point to actually try and marshal. This one is potentially quite thin, however, so a single unit of Rhudaur pikemen could be incredibly useful up here. A single unit of Rhudaur swordsmen not going to be enough. Trollshore axe throwers now, seeing the danger that this poses, they're going to be able to throw their projectiles in, which will do decently against the 2nd Legion. But the armour upgrade will help them quite a lot in those terms. Meanwhile, over here this is going to be a real slog. A single choke point fight from the front. Dwarves actually shaken at this point. Some Dunman pikemen being added to the front line, so Joran's reinforcements here being very useful. Javelins also being used. Not quite. Only a few of them are really being able to throw their javelins to the units which are on the far side of this engagement. But it's better than nothing. And that is how Rhudaur will win these melee fights against Khazad-Dum. And those Dunman pikemen will be really good, acting as an anchor for the rest of the Rhudaur forces. It's a numbers game for Rhudaur, and they've started as they mean to go on. Oof, that is a really, really nasty volley there from the Trollshore axe throwers. They're going to do continuous damage to the miners and warriors of Khazad-Dum, which are fighting down here in the gap, which is going to be necessary. Like I said, warriors of Khazad-Dum are going to have the beating of Rhudaur swordsmen. And Trollshore axe throwers are not really up to much in melee, to be honest. Dwarven arrows also finding their way back here. Don't know how much damage they're necessarily going to do there. Rhudaur pikes, of course, are shielded as well. Another unit of spears are being sent forward as this one unit of Rhudaur swordsman. Victory is a distinct possibility, I assume. Yeah, there's Attenmore's troll hunters back down there. Colfell maidens are getting very close as well, using those armour-piercing projectiles. So this initial dwarven assault anyway is going to be thrown off. Not without dealing damage, but they're going to need more units coming up this way if they hope to continue this assault. It does look as though that's what's going to be happening. Another unit of warriors of Khazad-Dum making their way up here. Meanwhile, Orc Hunters continuing to fire. And there is a unit of 3rd Legion on the front line now as well, made of sterner stuff than the warriors. Also capable of chucking out more damage. Over here in the settlement, Reforged javelins getting in this position. That's going to be nasty for the dwarves. A real meat grinder here. This is going to cost both sides pretty dearly, though. It's just a matter of who gives out first. Will the dwarven quality not be enough to get through all of these men of Rhudaur? Or will Rhudaur's manpower not be enough to stop the inevitable dwarven march? I think the addition of those pikes is very important, because it will make life much more difficult for the dwarves to push their way through here. Even if the Dunman pikemen will do very, very limited damage to the dwarves overall, it makes the dwarves' task much, much more difficult. And especially if you back it up with a bit of armour piercing from the Rhudaur Axeman. Javelins continuing to do their thing as well for Odgem javelins. The upshot of this for the dwarves is it's mostly basic units of dwarves which have been committed so far. So with all of these javelins and throwing axes being used already, later on when the more serious dwarven units make their way forward, it might come down to just all about a melee fight. And that is of course something that the dwarves will be sincerely hoping happens. Only a few, again, because of the angle, only a few of the unit able to find a good angle. This is a worry for the dwarves though. Their units are starting to rout, and this could mean it's always a bad sign when your assault completely collapses and you've got to start again from your beginnings. We shall have to wait and see if that is the case. You can see this first line of Rhudaur defence has been blown through now. But those Attenmore's troll hunters being able to shoot into the back, Colfell maidens doing the same on the other side. So at this point, the front line for Rhudaur is covering so much surface area. If the dwarves want to really push forward, they're going to have to come forward in numbers. This isn't going to be enough to worry this Rhudaur front line nearly as much as they need it to. 3rd Legion infantry pushing their way forward, as well as some warriors of Khazad-Dum finding their gaps. Just a single unit of Rhudaur clans which have been slowly pushed backwards. The 2nd Legion heavily depleted at this point, but their job has been done, and now more infantry is going to be able to push their way down here, including stopping these Attenmore's troll hunters from firing into the back of that assault that was happening over there. And that is going to be certainly well appreciated, I'm sure. But Blackwolds and Rhudaur Axemen pincering these 3rd Legion, so they're definitely going to need some support here, the 3rd Legion, because they're being caught between 2 units of heavy Axemen, varying quality, but the Blackwolds in particular will do a lot of damage. They are going to get some support from some warriors and some more 3rd Legion as well. Javelins being used in support, so again Rhudaur are going to be doing damage to the dwarves here, but it's all about that inevitable slow push here from the dwarves, I think. That's how they're going to have to try and tackle matters. 2nd Legion Axe Guard pushing forward. This unit of Orc Hunters is also back here with their twin axes. Which Roman slavers are on the front line over here as well. That's going to be a worry for the dwarves. I do think the dwarves need to be a little bit more aggressive at this point now. I think they need to flood forwards. Yes, they're going to take damage, but they're going to take damage from javelins no matter what. That's how the battle has been set up. Over here, meanwhile, the dwarves have been pushed back a little bit. I'd assume that's because of the routing. The fact that there is now this armour piercing on the front line from the Rhudaur Axeman. Another wave coming forward. It looks like that's 4th Legion Shield Guard, and indeed it is, but they need to be a little bit more. They can't afford to just send forward individual units at this point, the dwarves. They need to be a little bit more all-in, because if they just send forward individual units, you can see the Khazad-Dum, their morale is good, but it's not unbreakable with their basic units. And routing has been a problem for them here on the front gate. And Rhudaur continuing to hold on to this front line. The combination of pikes, axes, and then basic swordsmen doing the business so far. Depleted axe throwers still doing their thing. The catapult has been occasionally taking pot shots into the waiting army behind. Again, we're seeing routing. Sentries of Khazad-Dum, 3 of them are in there. They're routing. Looking like some out of ammunition orc hunters being committed to the front line. Again, I think at this point it's the same sort of principle as sending forward fodder into a fight they're never going to win. You need to be a little bit more proactive here from the front, I think, Khazad-Dum. Otherwise, all you're doing is sending units individually into their doom. And that means you're going to be almost entirely reliant on the dwarves out here doing the business, which, to be fair, it looks like this is a little bit more like it, from my perspective. Sending forward units to engage all throughout the lines. 4th Legion Shield Guard, of course, certainly have the beating of Rhudaur clansmen. Warriors of Khazad-Dum in support now. I think a little bit more is going to be needed in the long run, but still, this is a little bit more like it. But the Blackwolds and the Rhudaur Axemen have managed to push the 3rd Legion back. And you can see back there, Khazad-Dum Reclaimers, Rhudaur being given a taste of their own medicine. Not often this is the case for them. Ettenmore's Troll Hunters taking a lot of damage. If I were them, if I were in range of the Reforged Javelins, that is definitely the better target to go after. Not only are they unshielded and more lightly armoured, but they also represent a much bigger threat at range and in melee. One of the best single units to use, I think, actually, against Khazad-Dum in the Rhudaur roster are the Reforged. Up here, Guards of Khazad-Dum. I mean, we're getting to the point of the battle now where we are going to start to see some of the bodyguard units for the dwarves come into play, and that's an area where Rhudaur are going to have to rely on numbers, really. The Enslavers can somewhat keep pace, but other than that, Rhudaur have got nothing that will be able to even come close to the kind of power that the Dwarven high tier units can bring to bear. Guards of Khazad-Dum with their armour piercing as well. 3rd Legion Infantry continuing to move down, but again, 3rd Legion Infantry not going to do all that well against Blackwolds, supported Blackwolds as well. More units being sent forward, Orc Hunters. 4th Legion Shield Guard and Warriors of Khazad-Dum continuing to engage. Oh, and there is actually a unit of Granadine Rangers. So they do have body piercing, which is going to be very useful. We shall see if that proves to be a substantial addition. The dwarves have managed to make up their losses again. They've managed to push into the settlement a little bit more once more. Ettenmore's Troll Hunters firing into, I think it was the 3rd Legion? Was it? Yes, it was. So doing some damage to the 3rd Legion before they get a chance to move into the front line. Let's not forget, Khazad-Dum still have the Iron Watch that they can utilise, and there it is. A very dangerous unit that Rhudaur need to be aware of. Similar sort of power in them, really, as the Granadine Rangers will probably have in this fight, which says a lot considering the amount of kills Rangers can get. Lots more elite units back here as well. So Khazad-Dum continuing to do their thing. But Rhudaur also committing forward Granadine pikemen to the front line, respecting the fact that Legion units are now being committed to this front gate. They are answering in kind. But it's out here, really, where I think we're going to start to see the real moving and shaking in this fight, because I think eventually Khazad-Dum will break through out here, and then, of course, Rhudaur are going to have to not just focus on that one gate when it comes to defending the actual settlement itself. Rhudaur Axemen being committed to the front line as the dwarves are actually pushing through with their 4th Legion and breaking. It takes a lot, actually, to break Legion units like this, given the situation as it stands. Reforged Javelins are back there, Granadine Rangers. Coalfell Maidens being skirmished. I don't really think the Coalfell Maidens are the best target, to be honest with you. I'd be shooting into the Rhudaur Axemen over there, because you're going to kill them en masse, and the Axemen also represent a threat to you in melee. Reclaimers and Guards of Khazad-Dum in melee, backed up by a unit of Warriors of Khazad-Dum. That's going to be a real problem for these men of Rhudaur on the front line. The quality that they're now being faced with is going to be a concern for the Northmen. I think there's a garbage lorry outside. A weird whirring sound that I can hear even through my headphones, but regardless, body piercing projectiles certainly doing a lot of damage to this part of the front line over here. And with the addition of the Witch Realm Enslavers, pikes are also still on the front line. The Granadine pikemen, they are still able to hold on. Throwing axes still being utilised as well. These are the Granadine Berserkers as well, so they're going to pack more of a punch than the Trollshaw axe throwers. Not only that, but they're also going to represent a far bigger threat in melee. But still, Khazad-Dum pushing forward Mithril Guard. 3 hit points of Dwarven goodness, which Rhudaur will struggle with. They're going to need to. Again though, look at this. The dwarves completely being thrown back. And this speaks poorly actually of this Dwarven assault. The fact that it's always, I think, a bad sign when the attackers allow this to happen. Yes, it's a choke point which is really, really... Well, I say that, they have managed to make good on the situation, to be fair, with a volley from the Iron Watch of Miramir. If that was intentional, then I take back what I was halfway through saying. If it wasn't intentional, however, you should never be allowing the front lines to sputter and die if you're the attackers, because it allows the defenders to get back into position, and it gives the defenders a feeling of a victory. Because it was. Just one volley from the Iron Watch, which I think is right, because none of these units are strong enough really to warrant another volley, but still. Rhudaur celebrate among the conquered dead. And as well they should. They've done a good job on that choke point so far. Sons of the Fallen coming forward, as well as the Meteor Guard, Khazad-Dum Reclaimers, and yeah, this is what I was talking about. This is why I think Khazad-Dum should have actually been more aggressive right from the off. Because yes, there was lots of javelins, lots of damage to be done, but you can see Rhudaur, as soon as the dwarves came forward in force, they were like, yeah, we need to retreat. There's no way we're going to be able to hold up against this sort of thing for too much longer. Rhudaur swordsmen breaking all of the elite units on the front line, which is now going to lead to a full surround on the settlements itself. And depending on how Rhudaur want to approach this, they could go all in on this gate, or what I would do is split between the 3 gates. There is that over there as well. I think they were going to get some reinforcements from Doctor to Doctor, yes indeed, a couple more units of infantry, including some Khazad-Dum, no, not some Khazad-Dum Reclaimers, some warriors of Khazad-Dum, just to make sure that the losses accrued on the outside here are not going to be too significant, and they are going to be able to continue to move forwards. Rhudaur Axemen are routing, Rhudaur Swordsmen are routing, Coalfell Maidens are not, but that's a lot of routing that was done there, so a lot of these units probably won't be returning to the fold either. But a chance for Khazad-Dum to reset and reignite their assaults on the front line. Mercenary Cavalry and Coalfell Maidens going at one another. Coalfell Maidens routing as a result though, they've already taken substantial losses, cut off from enemy lines, units routing all around them and approaching Dwarven infantry. All the reasons why they would perhaps rout. But a good battle this so far. Have the dwarves begun to attack over here once again? They have. But to be fair, these Rhudaur swordsmen not going to do so well. So some more free kills for the dwarves. Plenty more where that came from though in terms of basic Rhudaur units. Rhudaur once again going to get this defence back into position. Javelins on either side. Plenty of pikes and basic infantry to block the dwarves' progress in through this front gate. Crowned pikemen very useful. We haven't seen the 1st Legion pikes used yet, for good reason. If they were committed on this front line already, they would have been javelined to death really quite quickly. A little bit more open over here as well. Blackwolds over here, Reforged javelins, combination of Crowned Berserkers and pikemen. Pretty nasty indeed. Rhudaur Axemen that are routing. They didn't manage to get within the settlement clearly, and now they're going to leave as well. I mean, I don't think there is a town centre, even though it is visible. You can see over here that, you know, it looks like there's a town centre, but I think it's like the Siege of Fornost that we saw previously made by Eclipse, where the town centre is there, but it doesn't really exist as such. Mechanically, it doesn't exist. Dealing with what very little remains of Rhudaur outside the gate, these routing units being dealt with by the banner carriers. Bloodied up, the one survivor. Retreat. Retreat where, my friend? So it'll be interesting indeed to see where Khazad-Dum end up. So they've got the ram. It'll take a while to get all the way around there, to be fair, but if they just send a small detachment around that way, it'll give Rhudaur something to think about. It means they have the knowledge that eventually they'll have to deal with the situation in 3 gates rather than just 2. Another volley coming in from the Iron Watch. That's the sort of thing which probably can cause a crash, which is why I'm zooming back out. Against the Reforged javelins. Decent target. There's still a decent blob of Rhudaur units as well, so it makes a certain amount of sense that they have elected to use a bit more of their ammunition in their pride and joy. Where are the Iron Watch? They're back over there. Yeah, the dwarves now, Rhudaur, closing the jaws a little bit more. Orc Hunters broken and fighting to the death, as are the 3rd Legion. At least they're fighting to the death, I suppose, so it still maintains a dwarven presence in the settlement, but that is a very tall pile of corpses at this point. Both man and dwarf. You can see over here the dwarves not going to be allowing any sort of sally out, at least not for free, with 4th Legion and dwarven miners on the front line. Warriors of Khazad-Dum going to be pushing them out. To be fair, a sally out would not be out of the question, to be fair, with the likes of Berserkers, Rhudaur pikemen. These Ettenmoor's Trollhunters have got a much clearer shot as well, actually, than the javelins had on the front gate. So that is something which is going to be working against the dwarves of Khazad-Dum here. Still plenty of men of Rhudaur within the settlement to be concerned about. Bit of a lull in proceedings here. I think what's happening is they're going to be waiting for the assault to get underway on the other side before they commit to another all-out offensive over here on what we have been referring to as the front gate. Perhaps we should refer to it as the west gate. West-facing gate, this one more south, the other one more north. And the ram moves forwards. And there we go. It does look as though they're not going to go around and attack the other gate either. It was an option that was open to them, but to be fair, they've only got 1 ram over here, so they could, in theory, pick up this ram again and push it around to the other side. I would do that, even if it's just 2 or 3 units that you send up there. For the reasons that I said, it means Rhudaur cannot just focus entirely on 2 rather narrow gatehouses. But we'll see. We'll see how Khazad-Dum decide to approach this. The attackers will always dictate the pace of a fight after all. The defenders, all you need to do is hold. What was that? Another volley from the Iron Watch and Miramir. Actually, most of those shots unfortunately missing from a Khazad-Dum perspective. The Iron Watch has been a bit of a mixed bag so far, but the Rangers weren't as devastating as they could have been either, I don't believe. And now forward comes an assault. Again, they're probably going to be slightly perturbed by the presence of those Ettenmoor's Trollhunters. The worst thing Rhudaur could do is actually push forward to the gatehouse itself. They need to keep this gap here so that those Ettenmoor's Trollhunters can have the best shot possible. Hexagonal shields down, backed up by Rhudaur pikemen as well. Then come 4th Legion shield guard. Up on the hill over there, the Orc Hunters of Khazad-Dum. I mean, you may as well, you've got a perfect shot really into them. And the shields are actually pointing the wrong way, so you will actually get a decent amount of kills on them. Ooh, and that's unfortunate. Traversable terrain, and the Ettenmoor's Trollhunters engaged in melee. I mean, this is a good opportunity now to send forward a bunch more infantry, because this is not going to be enough. They're going to need to send forward more infantry here, Khazad-Dum, to make sure that this assault can continue. Over here, meanwhile, again, just a single unit of infantry being moved forward, and this could, if this is the sort of thing which continues, this could end up being what spells the end for Khazad-Dum's hopes of taking the settlement. If they just don't commit enough to their assaults until it's too late, it could end up being a real issue. This unit of 3rd Legion will chip away at these Rhudaur clansmen, and ever present on the front line so far for the men of Rhudaur. Rhudaur pikemen will squeeze in as well, which has been the issue so far on this front line. Are they going to send up? Yes, they are, which is good. This is the sort of thing which I did recommend. They're sending off a larger force than I thought they were going to initially, actually, which is quite interesting. But yeah, more reinforcements needed on the front line. Yes, the 4th Legion will do quite well, but they're being overwhelmed so far. The Ettenmoor's Trollhunters are not defenceless in melee, and they're being backed up by a plethora of Rhudaur swordsmen. They also have the benefit of those Trollshaw axe throwers in behind. More spearmen coming through the gates now. Again, those pikes will feel fairly comfortable for the time being. This is a little bit more like it though. Plenty more meat on the bones of this Dwarven offensive if this is the case. Still though, those axe throwers getting a good amount of damage done, breaking the 4th Legion shield guard, so again a little bit too slow on the uptake of the dwarves. And this potentially will allow, of course, the Admiral's Shoals to get back into position over here. Black Bolts are going to be heading over to the north-facing gate, meanwhile the western gate. More dwarves. Say more, actually. Yeah, there is 2 units in there. 2 units of 3rd Legion. 2 units of upgraded 3rd Legion. They're going to try and push through the lines to get into melee with those Reforged javelins. I don't know if they still have ammunition left, per se. They're depleted, bloodied. And in melee, to be fair, they'll do decently against the 3rd Legion. I think it'll just be a case of the fact that they're depleted, that they maybe don't perform as well as they would normally with those armour-piercing spiked clubs. Continuing to push upwards. Are they going after the catapult, I wonder? They are. The catapult does still have ammunition. I mean, for this to be worthwhile, they need to send forward more units, and they're going to do so. Good to see. Sons of the Fallen, 4th Legion Shield Guard. They are going to be intercepted before they make it to the catapult crew by, again, even more Rhudaur swordsmen. So many men of Rhudaur on the defence today. And more Rhudaur axemen moving forward as well to attack them from the rear, which is probably going to spell the end for these dwarves pretty rapidly. I have to say, I think Rhudaur have handled the defence really rather well thus far. Khazad-Dum's attack has been a little bit messy, but Khazad-Dum can always rely on a bit of quality maybe to see them over the line. Pikes. Victory seems certain, only a fool could lose this battle. Sending forward elite units now as well, which is a bold play. Perhaps they feel as though the javelins won't be able to get into a good enough position to really make the difference now, but I think it's good that the dwarves are now sending forward units of genuine quality. Sons of the Fallen will be very difficult for them to deal with. Iron Watch of Miramir, they're going to get hits on those Rhudaur axemen. They need to be careful not to hit their own men at this point though, now that they're committing so much of their force. I'm impressed that those 3rd Legion haven't broken, to be honest with you, and perhaps it has something to do with the fact that more basic units really than anything else, but throwing axes being utilised. Meanwhile on this assault, Rhudaur still have this under control. The pikes and the black bolts doing a good job, but actually pushing through the line are the Sons of the Fallen. Now they're chasing down the Franadine Rangers, trying to prevent them from using their body-piercing projectiles. Now they're going to turn around and go after the Rhudaur clansmen. Trollshore axe throwers are also over here, so the dwarves starting to push through the lines in places, which Rhudaur do need to be on the lookout for. Heavy dwarven metal indeed. They do need to be ready to commit more reinforcements to this front line though, Khazad-Dum, because this is going to be costly going about matters in this way, because it's going to give good targets for the axe throwers, and also stuff like the black wolves are going to be really, really good in melee in this sort of situation. Admiral's Troll Hunters pushing forwards. The victory is a distinct possibility. It's because they outnumber the Sons of the Fallen so much, and the Sons of the Fallen are getting hit in the rear as well by black wolves, but again it's a bit of a messy fight this. The dwarves will do damage, but unlike on the front line where eventually I think the dwarves will push through the front gate, the west facing gate, I think the dwarves will eventually falter over here, but they will still do damage. And then over here, yeah, the dwarves continuing to push through. This is a choppy frame rate now, to be sure. Guards of Khazad-Dum pushing through over here, but again they find themselves cut off and behind enemy lines. Witch-Arm Enslavers with this support, I would imagine that would be enough to actually finish the Guards of Khazad-Dum. For the time being, you can see the Dwarven quality says that they still have victory in this fight, but that will probably cease to be the case after a little while, as the armour-piercing blows continue to rain down. The problem, of course, is going to be in here. The dwarves pushing forward, really putting pressure on the Rhudaur front line now as well. The numbers are somewhat even, but the quality favours the dwarves. That is a bad sign indeed. Atomor's Troll Hunters getting into a good position and dealing damage, so that could be a real lifesaver for Rhudaur in this position. Legion Bodyguard on the way forward. There, one of the catapults crumbles. One remains. I don't know if they still have ammunition, but if they do, it's actually Rhudaur friendly fire which has destroyed the catapults, which is most unfortunate. If they still had ammunition, that is a bit of a loss, but it would have been very useful for dealing with that dwarven blob, which is currently being attacked by axe throwers and javelins from both sides, so that's still going to be costly for the dwarves, to be sure. Sons of the Fallen have ultimately been dealt with. Blackwolds, the culprits. But more units being pushed forward. Khazad-Dum Reclaimers, 2 units of them. That sort of damage spike is going to be very, very useful for the dwarves here, and we're really into the decisive moment in this fight. If Rhudaur can hold on, hold their front lines and get their support units into position, then they should go on to win this fight. If they don't, however, if the dwarves do wash over them, then the quality will be a real problem. Like over here, for example, 2 Reforged javelins either side. This isn't traversable terrain either. But again, another dwarven force. All of these units would have been really, really useful elsewhere in the settlement, so it's definitely right that Khazad-Dum are pressurising all the angles here. Oof. That frame rate though, Legion Bodyguard pushing up here, but defeat seems certain. Is this going to be the story of the battle? Khazad-Dum just not going to have quite enough. Froggy's General falls, the Witch Realm Enslavers on site. Between them and the Rhudaur Berserkers, you definitely have the armour piercing to cause the dwarves some problems as Rhudaur. And Rhudaur still have those javelins patrolling the other gates as well. But it's pretty much everything being committed at this point. There's 1 unit of Rhudaur Pikemen and 1 unit of Rhudaur Clansmen in the town centre, but other than that, Rhudaur have everything committed. Or at least close enough to the front line where it will be committed momentarily. Rhudaur Rangers shooting point blank into the dwarves that are over here. Yeah, and I think the winds are blowing favourably for Rhudaur at this point in proceedings. Mithril Guard are here on the front line though, still 62 of them remaining, the 3 hit point monsters that they are, but to be fair, Blackwall's one of the better units Rhudaur could commit against them. They will lose, but they'll at least do damage, and then something else can finish the Mithril Guard off later on, or Mithril I should say. Meanwhile, Rhudaur Berserkers getting into position. I think they siphoned off one of the Reforged javelins to be behind the lines. Combination of Rhudaur Swordsman and Dunman Pikemen. Oh, and that is traversable terrain. I didn't think that was the case, but a good catch there by Froggy. Going to prevent those Reforged javelins from firing by getting those Khazad-Dum Reclaimers into melee. They're going to need more assistance, so the Reforged javelins have got those 2nd hit point. 2nd Legion Axeguard doing the same to the Rhudaur Berserkers over on this side. Substantial that, but it does of course give a completely clear shot for the Reforged javelins in behind. Some guards of Khazad-Dum are in there as well, so potentially fertile ground this for Khazad-Dum as they push into the settlement. And I think seeing that, the reinforcements that were in the TC are going to be committed down to that front line. Rhudaur Pikemen could be absolutely invaluable there. Yeah, everything has been thrown in for the dwarves at this point, and they have reaped the benefits of that, and that could be, I think the dam has burst here, and that could be the end for Rhudaur, to be honest with you. They committed everything forward, which was risky considering the Rhudaur Berserkers and Ettenmoor's Troll Hunters firing into the blob. But this is why I've been surprised that the dwarves haven't done this more often in this fight. Really testing the waters and testing Rhudaur's mettle. Because now that they've done that, you could also look at it as being they bided their time perfectly here on the front line, the dwarves, and now they are washing over the Rhudaur front line. And at this stage, Rhudaur Berserkers, what remains of the Enslavers and Pikemen, ultimately will be overrun from the dwarves from the front. And while I think Rhudaur would have won over here in the long run, although even that, to be fair, is... No, I think they would have. The Mithril Guard are taking a lot of damage. So yeah, Rhudaur would have won on this gate. It's sort of probably fairly even, slightly favouring Rhudaur on the northern gate as well, but the heat that these 2 gates have taken has allowed the western gate force to do the business. There goes a Rhudaur general. There's another one in there as well. You can just see him poking through. Mithril Guard having to deal with Blackwolds and Enslavers. Reforged javelins on the front line now as well. This assault will ultimately be brought under control from Rhudaur, but there's not going to be enough of them left to turn around and meet the force that's marching through the west gate at this point, I think. So I think that's going to be that. Trollshaw Axe Throwers in melee, trying to do what they can, but of course it's not really where they're at their finest. Over here, again the dwarves really pushing forwards aggressively, but yeah, you can see over here the Khazad-Dum Reclaimers, that second hit point making all the difference there in the fight between them and the Reforged Javelins. And those Rhudaur Rangers in behind also doing the business, but concentration of force over here has meant the Rhudaur Berserkers have been blown through, and those second Legion I imagine are going to try and silence that Ranger. Another Rhudaur General falling, starting to fall in quick succession, and of course because the town centre is a false TC, the morale of Rhudaur is likely to break before the morale of Khazad-Dum. And that may very well continue to be the case. The pikemen here on the front line are doing a really good job at containing the dwarves, but they're not going to be able to kill the dwarves quickly enough. That job is going to have to be the work of the Reforged Javelins if they are to have any sort of success. Yeah, here you can see, look, Witchram Enslavers intercepting the 2nd Legion. Might be enough to rout them as well, but they are chasing the Rhudaur Rangers away. There goes another general hewn by a Dwarven axe. I think that was over here as well, was it not? No, it wasn't actually. There's no 2nd Legion over here. Black Waltz though finishing the Mithril Guard off, but again over here it's just a case of Rhudaur not being able to kill off the dwarves quickly enough. I'm a little bit surprised honestly that the dwarves are not committing some of these units at this point to go throughout the settlement, rather than just all piling into the front of this one unit of Rhudaur Berserkers. Rhudaur Berserkers coming over here, because even a unit of Hammers of Gundabad just marauding around the settlement would give Rhudaur something else to think about. 2nd Legion Axe Guard over here, going toe to toe with the Rhudaur Berserkers. Again, the second hit point of the Rhudaur Berserkers going to be very key. Scattered remnants over here, broken and fighting to the death. And that's not too surprising. They stopped the Rangers from doing their thing for a little while, which is probably worth it to be honest, but ultimately they were caught between some Enslavers and some Axe Throwers. Let's see what's going on over here, shall we? As the Mithril Guard continue to fight backs to the wall, the Reforged Javelins adding their clubs to the equation. And eventually the Mithril Guard will be laid low, but my word, they're going to go down fighting. And then over here, what do we have? The dwarves. The frame rate chugging a little bit at the sight of the mountain of corpses. Hammers of Gundabad. Oh, this is actually a real town centre. That's surprising. I wonder why then the Rhudaur forces, when they were routing, I assumed it wasn't a real TC, because when the Rhudaur forces were routing, they routed off the map. Which is interesting. But still, the town centre has been claimed, and I don't believe Rhudaur are going to be able to claim it back. Well, that being the case then, that's a perfectly valid tactic to employ. Rhudaur Rangers shooting into the Dwarven Blob, which is starting to rout at this point, so this assault from the northern gate is going to be brought under control, but again, it's more of a footnote of an engagement at this point, as I mentioned. Guards of Khazad-Dum and Legion bodyguards still there, but caught up in a web of pikes. Only 3 Mithril Guard remain. Rhudaur are going to have to launch a desperate assault to reclaim the town centre, but they're certainly not going to have the manpower left to do that, I wouldn't have thought. That routing units? Yes, it is. Buzzard, of course, losing his general very early in the fight. And now, Khazad-Dum. Soon that's Buzzard's army. They do lose control of the city because they have vacated it with all of their units. I mean, this is probably the more sporting thing to do rather than just hold on to the TC. They're coming down with all of their might at this point to try and finish Rhudaur off. And they probably will be able to do that, to be honest with you. Rhudaur Rangers trying to shoot into the front of the 4th Legion. Succeeding in doing so, but yeah, those Trollshire Axe Throwers are not going to last too long when it comes to stopping this assault. Of course, 1st Legion pikes as well, so in the melee fight, the dwarves are going to have the pike advantage, which in the late game is always such a significant thing. Hammers of Gundabad are also marching down here as well. to offer that extra punch. Unbreakable as well as they are. It means Rhudaur are not going to be able to rely on that sort of thing. But then they're probably the more susceptible ones for that kind of tactic now. Reforged Javelins making their way over here. They finally had victory over here, but Blackwolds. Trollshire is being dealt with. So it does look as though the dwarves are going to claim MORVA TARTH for their very own. Dealing with the savage men of Rhudaur, but Rhudaur putting up a good fight. For Savage Hillman against the best outfitted fighting force in Middle-earth, that ain't half bad. There goes another general, surrounded as he was. I think that leaves only one Khazad-Dum general left, I think. Which means there could only be the one general left standing at the end of proceedings here, which are enslavers going to break off from proceedings there. Yeah, Rhudaur's front line at this point isn't terribly well organised. There's one guard of Khazad-Dum remaining in and amongst his foes. Reforged Javelins just sort of waiting here. They could shoot into the side here, which could be fairly devastating if Joran could do that. Sons of the Fallen and Hammers of Gundabad in the vanguard, pushing through all of the fighting men of Rhudaur. Yeah, he needs to turn these javelins around, because that could be fairly devastating. I mean, I don't think it would be enough, but it would make life a little spicier here. Legion Bodyguard over here have intercepted the fleeing Witch Realm Enslavers. Not fleeing as in routing, but Demon's Hunter maybe he was flanking around. I'm not sure. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he was, rather than just fleeing to the TC. But the Legion Bodyguard at this point are too healthy, really, for the Witch Realm Enslavers to be successful against. Otherwise, they may very well outright win that fight because of the armour-piercing edge. There's also some 4th Legion Shield Guard on the way to offer a little bit of support as well. So that's going to be the end of them. Hammers of Gundabad flooding through the lines. And the Reforged Javelins weren't able to turn around and get their javelins into play soon enough. And the Sons of the Fallen will engage them. Sons of the Fallen will struggle a little bit against those armour-piercing clubs, but it's about the support they've got around them. Rangers diving into the front line as well. Is there anything left over here? A couple of units of dwarves cleansing the settlement. One Son of the Fallen. A banner carrier just sort of hanging out. And there we go. That, you would imagine, is going to be that, because all of Rhudaur's forces now concentrated over here. The Witch Realm Enslavers are falling away. And it is going to be this one unit of Reforged Javelins, I think, which is the last unit left standing for the defenders. Another general falls. Hammers of Gundabad getting around the flank. Still a Witch Realm Enslaver or two over here, though, still fighting. Fighting for their homes. And again, like, these high-tier Dwarven units always going to be a real nightmare to try and bring down. Another unit of 4th Legion Shield Guard heading over here as well, just for supporting purposes, to put it beyond all reasonable doubt. Continue to fight. I wonder, actually, will those Enslavers outlast the Reforged Javelins? Because the Reforged may very well rout. They are wavering as the Dwarven menace continues to squeeze them. The Dwarves now look like they're the defenders from this situation, which I guess from this point onwards they are. They have occupied MORVA TARTH. For what purpose, I'm not entirely sure, but there you go. And the player admits defeat, so that's Joran, his units fighting to the death. No, those Enslavers are gone as well, so I guess it must be these Reforged Javelins, the only thing that remain. as they go through the meat grinder. It's always going to be a problem when you see First Legion pikes, healthy First Legion pikes, still alive in the late game. But Rhudaur gave a good accounting of themselves here. I think it just came down to the dwarves. Indeed it has. And I think it just comes down to the West Gate. For a while I was a little bit concerned. 2 assaults were completely thrown off, and that's generally a pretty bad sign. However, in the end, they chose the right moment to just throw everything they had left forward, because I think Rhudaur were kind of feeling, you know, they'll probably just do the same thing, try and sort of take the slower approach, and we can try and split our attention between all 3 gates. And if Khazad-Dum had done that, if the West Gate forces had not attacked when they did, I think Rhudaur would have won this. But they chose to move forward when they did, and ultimately that led to the domino effect failure of Rhudaur's defence, which, you know, a good fight this though, a very good fight, very enjoyable to watch. Nice to see a new map as well. This is the sort of thing which I really like to see. And so we'll have a look through what did the business for Khazad-Dum. 564 kills on the Iron Watch of Miramir, so again, sort of Ranger level numbers those. And they're a little bit easier to use on the attack as well, because you can shoot over defences, which is pretty neat. So yeah, while Khazad-Dum don't have Rangers, this is really what they have to sort of make up for that gap. Orc Hunters also doing reasonably well, one of them at least. 246 kills on Warriors of Khazad-Dum, which is pretty decent. 315 on 3rd Legion, so you can see definitely the Dwarven infantry really showing its expertise, especially against those very large Rhudaur armies on the defence. 1st Legion pikes, when they were committed in the late game, they really racked up a kill count very quickly, which goes to show why they're the most damaging pike in the game, because usually pikes take quite a while to get those kills. And the 1st Legion do not. Warriors of Khazad-Dum once again performing well, so it goes to show again the rank and file Dwarven units certainly dominant over the rank and file Rhudaur units. Even the miners doing not too badly there, 218. Mithril Guard getting 363, again proving to be, that 3rd hit point is always going to be difficult for a lot of factions to deal with, but especially when you're talking about basic Rhudaur units. In the end, the Mithril Guard were stopped by a combination of Black Walls and Ferodrum Javelins and Witch Roman Slavers, actually. Or at least the depleted remnants of one unit of such. And then down here, again, yeah, some units getting over 200, including the Guards of Khazad-Dum. The armour piercing may not be universally useful against Rhudaur, but it is still useful against some of their higher tier units. Armour piercing is very rarely a complete waste. Even against Linden, the Noldorin units, after all, are heavily armoured. So yeah, a very good battle indeed. Big thank you to Froggy for making the scenario and sending this one to me. Like I said, new scenarios like this, or new maps even, doesn't necessarily have to be a scenario per se, but new maps are really the lifeblood of the game, really, because I've complained before about people constantly doing Bersergath, and not so much Moria anymore. I think people have sort of cooled off on Moria a little bit, but that used to be something which I got sent fairly constantly. But yeah, new maps. Like, there are plenty of maps in the game as well, like we saw with the Forlond map that was a couple of weeks back. There are plenty of maps that people don't really tend to use, which I find to be a real shame, to be honest with you, and people sort of get set in their ways and playing the same maps over and over again. I know that those maps are reliable and they are well made and they are fun, but a bit of variety is always the best thing. And this sort of battle proves it, I think, because it was, I bet it was fun to be a part of, because it was certainly fun to cast in this fashion as well. So moving forward, there are, I think, speaking of which, I think the next battle replay after this one will be a Cardinal Outpost one. I think enough time has probably passed to the point where I can do Cardinal Outpost again, but that is another example of a map that has been done a lot. But still be on the lookout for that. I think that was Lango, actually, who was a part of this battle replay. He sent it to me a long time ago, in fact, that Cardinal Outpost replay. But like I said, I'm always going to prioritise newer maps over maps that have been done to death. So you know, that's the reason why that one, and a similar situation with the Merlond replay that was fairly recent. You know, I got sent that one a long time ago, but I've only got to it now because, you know, that's just how it is when you send me a map that has been done several times in the past. Not that I'm complaining too much, but yeah, that'll probably be the next replay, to be fair, and continuing with sort of divide and conquer campaigns in and around the replays as well. Do feel free to send me more replays, by the way, because I think doing 2 replays a week is just about sustainable. But yeah, going through a bit of a drought, really. Just the first replay I've been sent really in a whole week, and that's always a bit of a concerning sign if the supply is drying up a little bit. But hopefully that doesn't tend to be the case. It tends to ebb and flow a little bit. Probably in a couple of days' time or something, I'll be sent like 3 or 4 all in a big glut and problem solved, really, but still. Once again, big thank you to Froggy, big thank you to all of the players that were part of this battle replay. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.